that connects you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Anna. Can people hear me today? Good, good. All right, so the title for today is aesthetics. It's a huge subject, very important, and I'm hoping that some of my experiences will help to deepen your own understanding of it. I guess I should start out by saying aesthetics was the first of what C.S. Peirce about 100 years ago called the normative sciences. The three normative sciences were aesthetics, ethics, and logic. Where aesthetics talks about the things that are admirable, and ethics talks about things that are right or wrong, and logic talks about the formal representation of truth. It's kind of interesting to look at the history of the word aesthetics because up until about 250 years ago, it was used in a very general sense where it referred to anything that had to do with your emotions or your feelings. The senses, and it's only in the 18th century and later that it became associated with notions of beauty and fine art exclusively. In fact it's very similar to the word art itself, where art used to mean anything that was not in nature, anything that was made by people. Like the word artificial comes from art in its old sense, and only later became used primarily in the sense of fine art. So aesthetics went through a similar evolution in its meaning. I have to say that somehow this idea of art and aesthetics and beauty is somehow underlying all of the scientific work. The way I like to do things, whatever I do, I try to do it in a way that has some elegance to it, something that I think is beautiful, not just to get a job done, but to do it in a way that pleases me in as many senses as possible. So I'm really happy that Stanford allowed me to choose my own title as I'm retired at Stanford, and my title now is Professor Emeritus of the Art of Computer Programming, and that's art. I chose that very very carefully in the sense of making something of beauty. 25 years ago, I gave a lecture about computer sciences and art, and I tried to explain in there how computer programs could be actually written that were noble and truly magnificent programs, and so on. Somebody came up to me afterward and gave me a counterexample, he thought, and that is, he said, "Okay, Don. What would happen if you're working for a bank and you had to write a lot of programs in COBOL for this bank and so on?" And it took me about a half an hour before I could think of any answer to that one. But in general, almost every but there still is way, I think, to find beauty in even that. Also going back into the 70s, I needed to create the system called TeX because of the books that I was writing, and I just couldn't be happy writing those books anymore if they wouldn't look good in print. And there was this revolution in the printing industry where the tried and true ways of typesetting that were using hot metal type were becoming like dinosaurs. The people who knew how to do it were dying out, and the new machines, unfortunately run by computers, had lost all the principles of spacing, especially when it came to technical books that had anything to do with mathematics. People solved the problems for simple books and for magazines, but mathematics got short shrift. So I was beginning to despair. How could I stand to write a book that would look atrocious? And fortunately, I happened to notice that that the new technology was something that it was just a small matter of programming in order to get an arbitrary page on these digital machines, and so I changed my whole plan for what I would be working on, and spent the next 10 years working on aesthetics of publishing. Conversely, now that I have tech, I'm sure that I'm motivated to write better books than I would have before, and I also I believe that I've got a lot of books now in my library that probably would never have existed without the fact that the authors could feel that they would have a book that they would enjoy having in their hands and seeing, and not just for the content, the actual semantics of the content. I read a story while I was working on this. I read a story about Herbert Hoover, who in the 1930s already, and then until he died at age 80, I'm not sure exactly when it was, but he would never like to see any of his writing typewritten. He would always insist that somebody would set it in type and print it up, sort of a galley proof, that he could look at it beautifully before he would even proofread it to see what and then he would say, "Oh no, I could cross this out," and so on. There are other people beside me who somehow have this idea that when you do something that you spend some time on, you also like to have some pride in the beauty of it at the end. Soon after I came to MIT, I learned about the aesthetics and computing project that John Maeda is running at the Media Lab, and so I went over there a couple of weeks ago, and I talked to a lot of his students, and boy, there's lots of fantastic new possibilities for engaging your left and right brain simultaneously. Now that computers are so fast and we have so many cool ways to make graphics, and the possibilities now are much greater than before for having really beautiful things combining with our technology. Still, I think that I want to emphasize that I don't see that there's a convergence between art and science. Somehow, I really think that these aesthetic things are beyond logic. That it's something that, I know something is beautiful somehow with a different way, completely different way inside me that I can't explain rationally. It's quite different from the way that I know a mathematical theorem is true. That I have certain kinds of knowledge that come from senses, I don't see that this is going to change. Although, of course, I can't prove that it will never happen. I certainly I recommend that people try to understand these emotional unrational things using rational means to a certain point, but I'm not betting that they'll ever succeed. I'm just betting that it'll be an interesting thing to continue getting better and better approximations. I do want to mention what's maybe one of the most, certainly one of the earliest major efforts in this direction, because it took place here in Cambridge. George Berkoff at Harvard published a book in 1933 called Aesthetic Measure. How many people have ever heard of that book? Yeah, we have a few here. So at the time, a lot of people regarded Berkoff as probably America's #1 mathematician, and certainly he would have to be in the top 5 by anybody's ranking. But anyway, he wrote this book where he has mathematical formulas by which you compute how beautiful something is. And there's page after page where you'll have different symbols, a hexagon or combination of squares in different ways, and you have the symbol there. Underneath it, a number, 0.789. and the higher the number, the more beautiful. And similarly, pots, vases. You could calculate the aesthetic measure of a vase, and he also went into music and had numbers for this. Well, I have to say, I looked at this book, and my numerical ranking wouldn't correlate very well with that, but it's still, I mean, he has a right to making a big failure, just like I do. I mean, if I want to try out some ideas, I don't have to succeed at all. But I think he actually thought this was one of his greatest successes. Maybe I have the similar kind of a hang-up. I looked it up in the online catalogs. There's copies of this book, Aesthetic Measure, in seven Harvard libraries, and one of them, in fact, at the Widener Library one copy at Widener Library was actually checked out. So people are still reading it. There's one in MIT's retrospective collection, which is remote stored. The book was translated into Spanish, and I found excerpts published in French and German and several other languages in the library. So anyway, I think it's kind of flaky I did a similar thing with tech. I have a way to, if you try to break a paragraph into lines and you try to say how good is this particular way of presenting the lines of a paragraph, I have a numerical measurement, and tech actually tries to find the best, the measurement that has the least badness according to this measure. But so I did a similar way of trying to measure beauty, but the difference between me and Berkhoff is that I didn't believe in my measure. I freely admitted it. It was just a crude approximation that would tend to correlate, but I had to have something that I could compute quickly that would most of the time be not so bad. I'm planning an exercise for Volume 4 of Art of Computer Programming, which will be to try to write a piece of music that's optimum by his criteria, and we'll see how it sounds. Okay. Well, I just happened to see an interview with John Polkinghorne in the current issue of Science and Spirit, where he said the mystery of music and the reality of music eludes science. I think it's great to learn more about music and art in these quantitative ways, but it seems to me there's a huge gap between what will probably ever be achievable by our rational understanding instead of an intuitive, emotional understanding of this. Even in scientific and mathematical work, the elegance of a theorem and these aha insights defy explanation. And I don't see why there should be only one way to understand things. But anyway, I'm going to say more about this in later lectures, and we could debate these points. But today what I want to do is give concrete examples based on my experiences with the 316 project, because I think this taught me a few lessons about things about how some beautiful things can really make a difference in the meaning that I associate with rational things. So let's try slide number 1. Let me see. I push this button, and does it work? Okay. So now I guess we can have the house lights go down. Those of you who heard any of my previous lectures know that I worked on this book called 316, and it started out with us, a few of us at the church where I was, looking at chapter 3, verse 16 of every book in the Bible. And from the very beginning of this class, since we were focusing on these verses, several of the women in the class who were good at calligraphy decided that before class they would take the verses that we were going to study next and put them in big letters on a nice piece of paper, and we could hold them up in front of us as we were shining the light on those verses to try to figure out what we could about them. Now, a few years went by, and I was working on typesetting, and I met a lot of people who were really the best in the world on beautiful letters. And in particular, my great good fortune that I got to be friendly with Herman Zopp, who has designed about 20 of the best typefaces that ever were invented. And not only was he a good designer, but he also was very sympathetic to computers. And so I could invite him to Stanford, and we could work together on collaborative work. And so as the years went by, and I got the idea that I should write a book about these 316 verses, I wrote to Herman first, and I said, Herman, I've got this idea for a very strange book, and I wonder if you'd be able to help me. I designed the cover of it. And I said, I would like you to do for me the most beautiful 3 in the history of mankind. You know, the most beautiful 3 and the most beautiful 1 and the most beautiful 6 that have ever been seen in the history of the world, and also the most beautiful colon to go between them. And then I tried to explain to him the idea of my book, and to my, and fortunately, he liked the idea. He wrote back to me enthusiastically. He said, Don, I'll do the whole cover for you. And not only that, but why don't we get the top calligraphers of the world each to do one of these verses? And now Herman had worked in the 40s at the time of the 500th anniversary of Gutenberg's press. He had been the main organizer of a project called Liber Librorum, which was to get the best printers from all over the world to print 2 or 3, 4 pages of a Bible the way they would do it in 1948 or whatever it was, 7 or whatever the year was, using their in order to see what was Gutenberg's invention 500 years later. And collected several dozen of these examples of newly designed Bible, not full Bibles, but just each printer would decide what part of the Bible to print, but just to. But anyway, it's a wonderful collection of things, and it's now very prized by book collectors. I think they made 200 sets of these things, and when I first saw the thing, it almost made me cry because it was so much more beautiful than what I could see by ordinary getting from my printers of my books, for example. My editor is sitting here in but anyway, it was really great to have this Liber Librorum problem. So now he's thinking of kind of a Scriptor Scriptorum project where he also would have a similar thing where he'd get calligraphers from all over the world, each one to do a one verse of the Bible, and he knew everybody and essentially, and I could drop his name, and so we could write a letter of invitation to the people who were the leading calligraphers in each country, and say, here's a verse. Would you render this for this book that's coming out? And Herman did the John 3:16 verse, and we printed it up and sent that out as an example of one of the things that would be in the book, so that they could get some idea of what we had in mind. So this artwork was being so when I was living in Boston in 85, 86, we wrote these letters, and just about Christmas time, the artwork started coming in, and it was, boy, like having Christmas presents every day. The wonderful things that the people were doing, and afterwards, the art was we realized that the artwork that we received was so inspiring that you couldn't just keep it to ourselves. There's no way to actually print in a book in a way that's as good as looking at the vibrance of a real original piece of art. And so we mounted the works and put them into a show that traveled around the world. It went to Europe several times. It went to Canada several times. The highlight of it was where it spent a month and a half at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. And there were about 35 different places where the works traveled, and now the collection is at the San Francisco Public Library. I want to show you some of the things from this exhibit. You won't be able to see them in the slides as well as if you could see the original, but I do have an original here of the new translation of John 3:16, which I'd like you to take a look at as you walk out afterwards, so that you can see an example of how of what it can be like the real one, and then you can compare it with the computer printout, which is downloadable from the web, which is it's okay, but it's really no comparison. Now, okay, but I gotta move on. So the artists were told that we were making this calligraphy for use in a book, and so they wouldn't have to actually make it. So they didn't actually make their artwork with the idea that it would be shown, but we asked for permission afterward. Here's one of the examples. I'll try to see if I can fix the focus and learn how to work this. This goes, okay. All right. So the artist here is Erkki Ruuhinen from Finland, who I think is the leading, certainly the leading calligrapher designer in Finland, I think now. And he had this particular presentation, and then I would take his work and convert it so that I could put it into the book. Using his directions, he wanted a different color for the word God at the bottom, and so on. And you have to remember, as you look at all of these examples, that I just gave him a sentence of words that didn't look like much, and he found a way to make it somehow impressive. In fact, what happened is that as I got the artwork in and started looking at, I would have these things in front of me as I'm writing the chapters, the text to go with them, and it had a great effect on the way I understood them. Somehow well, you have to experience it, I guess, to understand. But here's me at the Macintosh. I was working at this time to edit everything into digital form. When I did this, actually, very few books were printed with this kind of technology. Although now almost all of them are done that way. But it was pretty clear that computers were very slow. It would take in order to send 4 megabytes to the print to the Linotronic machine. It might take 15 minutes, and it was definitely much worse than all the commercial methods for printing at that time, as far as expense and time and everything were concerned. With one big difference, and that is that a person who is willing to to put a little love into a book, it was just a matter of putting 4 or 5 hours into each illustration. It was only 4 or 5 hours. I spent a lot more time writing the chapters than that. So this was a small percentage for me. But if I'm going to a studio and paying somebody by the hour for the time on the machine, it's quite a different proposition in those days. And I did this work at Adobe Systems. In fact, it was one of the great things of serendipity. I called up John Warnock. I don't know, I got his name out of the phone book or something, and I called up Adobe. I asked for John Warnock, and he answered the phone. And I said, John, I got this book that I'm thinking about, and I need to have some the best software for doing some very, very beautiful illustrations. And he said, "Oh yeah, we've got just the stuff for you." I tried calling him several times afterwards and never worked, but for some reason he was there that day, and he gave me the permission to come there, and so for about 3 months I was the night watchman at Adobe. I had a room full of about 50 Macintosh computers and most people had gone home for the night, and so I could the computers weren't that fast, but if I could set about 10 of them going, it was something like playing. If you've ever seen a simultaneous chess exhibition where a guy makes a move on one board and he goes to the next one, and that's what I would do. I would start the program here saying fill this, and then knowing that it's going to take 20 minutes, and I go to the next machine and I think, okay, now which one am I on this? And so at this time there was a brand new program that was in pre-beta test called Photoshop, and I was one of the first guinea pigs for that, and I worked with Tom, whatever, I can't think of his last name, who was in Ann Arbor, but he came out a couple times to California, and we were working also developing these software tools at that time. So I would look at the calligraphy and do fat bits editing in order to understand the processes of rendering it as well as I could in printed form. Now, forward. This is the original John 3:16 that Herman did, and as I said, I have a better translation now, so he's given me the new art in the which you can look at later. This was it. You can't see the color too well. The letters gospel, Gospel, are in red there. Now, his wife Gudrun's office also has designed some very beautiful typefaces, and actually Herman likes to use her typefaces, and so do I. And I knew that she loves the idea of peace, and so I asked her to do this verse, which we talked about last week, from 2 Thessalonians about peace. The next example is the one that we looked at. I want to show you first the verses we were talking about last week. They're still a little fresh in mind. Calligrapher here was Robert Williams. He's a black man in Chicago, about 60 years old, worked for many years for University of Chicago Press, and so he had the tough job of doing Genesis 3:16, which have these questions of women's liberation to deal with, and he made a lighthearted way of the word troubles and so on in a way to lighten it up a little bit. The verse from Habakkuk was one of the examples of poetry that I gave last time. Maybe I should ask my... Okay. This is Carl Georg Heffer from Germany, another one of the great masters who has a very unique style. Any calligrapher would look at this and they would know immediately that it was his work, and his books on calligraphy explain with many examples of this. I have to run kind of quickly through a lot of these. This is Jonah, and Lily Ronker from New York went to the Bronx Arboretum to draw one of the plants that was of the same kind of plant that was involved in the Jonah story. Another one we saw last week was this one. Remember about the fat cows of Bashan? The artist is Peter Fraterdeus of Chicago. He's got a lot of typefaces now that are, and I saw him at the International Type Conference that was in Boston a month ago. Many of the artists were in their late 70s or early 80s at the time because they spend their life with letters, and the man who did this is 2 Timothy, that all Scripture inspired by God is beneficial. Verse is David Kindersley, who is really the most well known for stone cutting, and he also did the road signs in Cambridge, England. And he has had some advanced theories about spacing of letters, but most of the good stone cutters in England, the top 20 would all have been apprenticed with him. I think it's fair to say, and he died a few years ago, and also about 10 of the other of the people whose work we'll be seeing have passed away since they did this work. But here in this case, the letters that he have are very, very typical of things that would be used in carving in stone. The verse from Nahum, "Your merchants outnumber the stars in the sky, grubworms stripped and off they fly," is by Gunnlaugur Briem, a very hardy Icelandic man who is in fact, when the show was reviewed by calligraphers for calligraphic magazines, they found that this was one of the perhaps the most interesting as far as the novelty of the letters were concerned. They were studying these for new ideas that he had in getting energy into his letters. First Peter is another one I talked about last week, where I had to decide about how to translate the Greek word for conscience, and the artist. This is one of my favorites, of course. The artist is Jose Mendoza y Almeida, who's Spaniard living in Paris, and I was so glad to see how my choice of translation is where I said maintain goodwill instead of keep your conscience clear, made this a really nice piece of work. The next is by Adolf Berndt of Germany, another man who's passed away. He was the oldest of all the calligraphers. Throughout his life, he had done a lot of work of all kinds, but including many Bible texts. And he did this one about Peter, whose name is Rock. Jesus chose Simon and gave him a new name, Rock. And he uses the symbol for Mark also in the top. Quite a different way of doing the letters from everybody else. This was done with watercolor, and I had a great time with Photoshop filling these colors in with different masks and things like that. Now, here's one that we didn't see last week, but I wanted to mention that when you deal with text, it's not difficult at all to make typographic errors. And in this case, the calligrapher is Alan Wang from the University of Oregon, and I had always liked his work. I chose him for this verse because I knew that he liked to put some pictures in with his letters. So this verse says he decorated the tops of the pillars with the chains, as in the inner shrine. 100 specially crafted pomegranates were attached to each chain, and I knew he could make a nice looking pomegranate for me. And so I asked him to do this verse. But he didn't know two things. First of all, he didn't know that the pillars weren't marble pillars, but they were bronze pillars. So he put this nice marble veining in there, but that wouldn't have been, in accordance with the text. But the other thing is that he added a word where he says with the chains. It really should have been with chains. And I tried to think, could I change my translations, so that would be okay, but it just wasn't right. It would have to. It should have said he decorated the tops of the pillars with chains, because the chains didn't make sense. So, but it's easy with Photoshop to edit these things. And so, if you look at the what came out in the book, you can see that I had to change the P a little bit so that there wouldn't be interference with the width and so on. But then, of course, I checked with him and said, is it okay the way I did it? And he said fine. But I had to do this in 7 or 8 of the cases where some difference between the translation that I sent them and what actually got done. Now here was the hardest case of this, where there the artist here is Donald Jackson from England, and it's very interesting because he's the calligrapher to the Queen in England, and he had done a series of shows about calligraphy on BBC, and very prominent person, and I asked him to do originally the Genesis verse, and he said no, he's not into domination. Can you give me another one? And so I gave him the Isaiah verse, which is the women of this city are so haughty, they strut around with heads held high, flirting with their eyes. And now here he had a typo. They mince along. I said they mince along with dainty steps, jingling with their feet. And when I saw his work, actually at this point he was inventing a new style of calligraphy done with brushes, and there were shows of this work, and he had done a lot of Tolkien with this particular style of lettering, and so I thought it was great and so on, and I'm digitizing it, and actually it was one of the last ones that that came in, and then I'm sitting there doing my fat bits editing, and all of a sudden it occurred to me. I said, "What? He says on dainty steps. Didn't I say with dainty steps?" And sure enough, I wanted this parallelism. You have with heads held high, with their eyes, with dainty steps, with their feet. Now this was so. Here was a typo that I just couldn't fix. With Photoshop, there's no way to sneak in, to sneak in the letters in there without doing violence to the whole composition. So how? But it's the last thing to finishing the book. How am I ever going to get this fixed? And already, I had to pull teeth to get this one because we had to go through two rounds on it. So just as I happen to be worrying about this, I happen to notice that I'm in the art department of Adobe, and on the desk of the Mac where I am, there was a article about a graphics magazine, an interview with Donald Jackson. And lo and behold, here he was. It said Donald Jackson is in Santa Clara this weekend. And so I drove. So 6 hours later, I was talking to him. He was in California, and I had explained him the problem, and so he promised to do it, and I had to remind him a few times, but I did get the artwork where it says with dainty steps coming later. Now he also sent me some other sheets that when he learned there's going to be an exhibit, he says, a lot of people think that when you do calligraphy, it sort of drops from heaven, but you have to warm up and do all kind of studies before the final thing happens. Unfortunately, this is quite dark, but but I can focus it a little bit. But these are some of the. This is sort of a collage made of some of the papers that he would throw away as he's getting going. So he starts out, the women of this city, and so on, and getting women of this city. So he's working on here's some upside down, some are right side up. Just to so in the show we put a few of these things so that people could study what goes on behind the scenes when artwork is getting created. Now the next story is the hardest one for communication, and also where I have to make a terrible confession. But this is the original artwork that I got from Russia, from Krasnodar, Russia. I think it's near the Crimea, and in this case, communication. You remember, this is 1985. This is long before Gorbachev is just getting started in Russia, and communication is very difficult, and things that get sent there can mysteriously disappear in the mail and so on. It's lots of censorship, but I sent him this verse to be done, and here was his solution. This is the passage that I talked about last week, 1 Timothy. This wonderful poem in the Greek. Christ was revealed in body, justified in spirit, witnessed by angels, proclaimed to pagans, trusted on earth, glorified in heaven. And after I had sent him the words to be done, I realized that my translation wasn't optimum. That in fact, if a better understanding of the original Greek in this verse was not to use the word acknowledge here, to say we acknowledge that true religion is a great mystery, but considering the context and so on, that it would have better to say we know that true religion is a great mystery. Well, fortunately, know is a subset of acknowledge, and Photoshop has this wonderful tool called the cloning tool. So I could take my. I'm sorry. Let me show you that too. This is a letter he wrote me, and you can't see it too well, but Lena Franenko Krasnodar. But he uses a Cyrillic typewriter to write English, and so in order to do an N, he does two ones and draws a bar by hand into them, and to do a U he does the Russian E, which is like a backwards N. And to get an R, he takes a P and draws. And so he finds as many Russian letters as he can, and he writes me this letter. But it takes us 6 weeks to correspond. So I couldn't tell him, change the acknowledge to no. But then so I did it with Photoshop, and again this is. Yeah, so this is what I did, and what appears in the book, and you see how no is shortened there. Now these are actually it's little pieces of parchment that he did the work on. Then he tore it in parchment and put it together, and so I could preserve the edges of the parchment, just use this cloning tool and make it look like a real piece of thing. But I also changed his art in another respect, because I was so it was important to me to have this Greek poem rendered in English with the parallelism. So I wanted the 6 parts of the poem to be revealed in body, justified, witnessed, proclaimed, trusted, glorified, to have that parallelism. So I also did that editing. You see how this. Let's compare that with the original. And here's the original. You see, I had to move this word "revealed" down here, and in order to show the parallelism in the Greek. So now comes the part where I have to make my admission, and that is this show of the artwork went around the world, as I said, and And at one point, it was in Canada, and a TV show was made of the exhibition, and the commentator went through for half an hour and visited the different works in the collection, and then afterwards they sent me the video of this show. And when they got to this one, the commentator said, "And look how this man in Russia had cleverly concealed an Orthodox cross in the pattern." And so, if you know about Orthodox cross, there's always this thing that's sort of at an angle at the bottom of the cross. Sort of like, I don't know, where Christ stepped off the cross or something. And so here in the background, between the letters, he has this idea of a cross with, the double bars is a part of it, and this diagonal is part of the thing. So completely unaware of this, and I had destroyed it. Okay. And I couldn't check with him because there's no way to communicate. So I have this now on the web, which you can download, and if we can sell enough copies to make a third printing, then it'll be okay in the third printing. But this artwork, at least, this has the original cross and the parallelism and so on, and I hope that this is okay. But anyway, as I said, this is where I blew it. Another one that I like very much is from Hungary. This Edith Zigani did 2 Corinthians. When a person turns to the Lord, the heavy veil is removed, and the colors and the way the Lord got in here is just great. Kirsten Ankers from Sweden is the lady who for many years was the calligrapher of Nobel Prizes. If you got a Nobel Prize, your certificate, she would be the one who did it. And she wrote to me that when she got this request to do the verse, that she was feeling down, and this particular verse was just what she needed in her life. And we found, and 5 years later, my wife and I were visiting in Sweden. We went to a mathematics institute, and so we called her up and said, "Can we? I'd like to meet you." And we went out to see her in her studio on one of the islands east of Stockholm. And to my surprise, she had made 2 copies of this, one for herself, and she's had it in her studio where she works. So she really found some uplift from this. This one is from Czech Republic. I think actually now it'd be Slovakia. No, I'm sorry. So it was Czechoslovakia at the time. And Lubomir Kratky did a very clever thing here. This is where St. Paul is writing between the lines. St. Paul is doing a very rabbinical thing of talking about a passage in this Galatians 3:16. He says, "Notice that the promises were addressed to Abraham and to his offspring," and then sort of in parenthesis, the passage does not say "and to offsprings" in the plural. It uses the singular "and to your offspring," meaning Christ. And so the way he decided to do this was to actually write between the lines with the red letters. And I had a lot of fun actually trying to having to go through and reconstruct where the things come together. The automatic tools for color separation don't exist. Judges 3:16 is an interesting passage that has to do with left-handedness, and so I got a left-handed calligrapher to do this one. This is where my name is Robert Borgia, and I had specifically saying who's the best left-handed calligrapher, and so he was the president of the Calligrapher Society in Chicago. In the book, so he has this his mirror image, the left tab. Ehud made himself a short double-edged sword and strapped it onto his right thigh underneath his clothes. And the fact that it's on his right thigh where he can reach it with his left hand is an important thing in this story. Now, he did his calligraphy as if it's a mirror image between the left and the right, but it's actually and he said he always writes in mirror image when he's teaching a class. And so it's actually not just a mirror. I mean, he actually did the letters individually. And then in the book we gray out the left half. But the idea is to somehow indicate this idea of leftness and as being part of the story. Tim Gervin did this verse, which is Micah, and Tim is a very famous designer in Seattle who, like, he did the Banana Republic logo and things like that. And he's got this is a famous verse that Martin Luther King Jr. used in his Nobel Prize speech. People will dwell in the shade of their own grapevines and their own fig trees. Nobody will make them afraid. For God Almighty has made this decree. And he had this nice tenderly rendition of that famous verse. Another favorite is from Revelation 3:16. The designer here, Rick Kuzik, is chief designer of Hallmark cards, and he is also the main editor of the main calligraphy magazines in America. Now, here the verse is, since you are, let's see if I can focus it again. Since you are merely lukewarm, neither cold nor hot, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. And you have all this dark red associated with it. And he wrote an interesting letter back. We had told him that we wanted to use a general color palette in this book where we would have solid colors instead of the normal 4-color process. But we would have a nice besides black, we'd also have a nice red and a nice blue, green, and a sort of a parchment color. And he said he started out trying to use all those colors, but then finally the solution hit him just to do it, in one color, one solid thing, but with this idea of the spit coming through. It's I think a tremendously good solution, and this is kind of a climactic verse in the 316 project, actually, to find out it talks about the idea of that apathy and lukewarmness is worse than being cold or hot, than the extremes. Now, one of the strangest episodes occurred with the man from Poland, Andrzej Kot, and it was quite mysterious. We wrote to him the letter, and a few months later, we received a package from Poland, and it was a big package, and it was just full of all kind of book plates, and there would be 10 copies of each of about 30 book plates. And we looked at them, very interesting, but what is this? And no letter, nothing else. It's just this thing full of. Now you have to remember, this is a time when Poland is also, there's a lot of censorship, and Solidarity is getting going, and so on, in 1985. People's letters are all being read if they come from abroad. And anyway, he sent us this big package full of all kind of book plates. 2 weeks later, we got another package, and this time some more book plates and a few other wedding invitations and other graphics that he had done. Very interesting, great style. And so, my wife made a nice little booklet out of these that we could do. Another package comes a few weeks later after that. And this time, what do you know? 5 solutions to this verse that I had asked him for. Elisha declared, "Here is what God says, pools of water will fill this dry riverbed." This is it's 2 Kings 3:16. And so here he has, all the letters in this fanciful fish, and he sent several of them. The one I liked best was this one, but unfortunately it had a typo in it. he left out one of the words. Elisha declared, "Here is what God says: pools of water will this dry riverbed." I couldn't stick "fill" in there anyway, so I couldn't use this one. And the one we actually used is this. It's a third version, and these are huge. I mean, this is almost no. Actually, I guess it was about 3 feet wide, and there's something about his style. When Newsweek magazine did an article about the 316 book, this was the illustration that they chose to illustrate from it, and also I think it was Stern in Germany chose the same one of all the ones. We still apparently didn't have any letter from him, to understand what it was. But I sent a check that for the that I promised to pay all the calligraphers, and I got his signature is interesting. It has a little cat. His name is Cott, and it has a little cat in it. And we got the canceled check, and it had his signature on it, and so on. But still, as far as I knew, hadn't heard from him. Well, then when we make the art exhibit several years later, I'm going through all of these things that we had in the boxes from these days, and because I was now looking once again at the ones that we decided not to use in the book, and there was a piece of paper in there that looked like it had a lot of pencil scratchings on it. Maybe he's sharpening his pencil, getting warmed up, or so on. But when I looked at it a little more, I said, well, maybe these are words, in Polish. And so we had a Polish visitor at the computer science department, and I showed it to him. And sure enough, this was a letter that he had sent me 3 or 4 years ago. And he'd say, I need pens, I need chocolate, anyway, and so quickly we sent a care package out, and apologized for not realizing that. But it was a very curious correspondence. Suffice it to say. Now, the calligrapher of 1 John 3:16. It is Jeannie Wong of New York City. She's also in her late 70s now. I remember her from many other works that I had seen. But for example, if any of you have this 9-volume set of history of Will Durant and Ariel Durant, she does the covers of those books, for example. Michael Harvey. What happened? What's going on? Uh-oh. Have we lost the bulb? There's a jam? Okay. I'll let her... What? Yeah, well, I tried to go backwards. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hello. Hope you can fix it. The next one that I have is by Michael Harvey of England. There's the. Michael Harvey is another man that's a prominent type designer, and so I am.
Did you start by scanning in the actual artwork?
Yes, I had a scanner. The scanners weren't very good in those days, but I had a Microtech scanner which had some bugs in it, and I would have to edit those bugs out. If I had a large piece of art, I had to scan it in 2 sections and paste them together. But then I would, but for the calligraphy, most of the time I would try to make it line art, which meant 600 dots per inch, say, and solid. So I had to convert, not half toning, and it was very delicate to make it so that the joints between strokes wouldn't fill up. So I had to do a lot of editing to open the joints up, especially on the. I worked I had a whole bunch of interesting mathematical transformations with Photoshop, but also a lot of handwork, like those tendrils on that grapevine. Lots and lots of work on that because I couldn't do it. Where are you guys?
We can use the very one you wanted to show us on the next one.
Okay, that's all right. Oh, well, this is Michael Harvey's. Ezekiel, 7 days came to an end, then Jehovah's word came to me. I just wanted to. He has a font now of these letters. There's no one else. This style is uniquely his, and I like it very much. Whoa. Okay. Now, what next? Now the next one was the hardest one of all to do. Derek Powell in Hong Kong sent me. He had this way of taking calligraphy and somehow getting it into making handmade paper and embossing it on handmade paper, and then he would shine a light, a raking light, so that you could see the image, and very, very interesting effect. But I couldn't. But at first I couldn't pick it up from the slide that he sent me, so I asked him to send me the original artwork, the paper. And meanwhile, I'd noticed that when I'm using the scanner was picking up things that I couldn't see on the artwork, like snowpake, whiteout. Artists weren't forbidden from using whiteout on this because it's for publication. But when you look at it through a scanner, where they put a little bit of whiteout, it would look like a mountain. And you'd see shadows and things like that. So what it turned out with this image, where the embossing was actually the way that was done, it dawned on me I could just put it in the scanner, and the scanner would be this raking sideways light that would pick up the three-dimensional aspect of it perfectly, and so that in fact is what happened. But this was my first proof back from the printer, and there wasn't enough contrast doing it in this color, so I changed to red then, and that worked out fine. I had to actually go with the mouse though and do all the letters by hand in order to do this. So he was from Hong Kong. Stephen Skaggs did this interesting thing you can't see too well, but it says orgies with old wine and new wine are making my people lose their wits. And he had this nice way of taking the letters for orgies and in different colors and mirror image, reversing them up and down and make it into a kind of the smoke in a party and so on, and so another great solution. The artist for Joel 3:16 was Friedrich Peter of Vancouver, BC, at St. Regent's College, and he felt that this particular verse was so powerful that he couldn't do justice to it, and he kept sending me more solutions to it. I had already digitized it and made it for the book, but I would get more things from him saying, I got to try it again. It says, on that day, God will roar from Mount Zion. And so on. And I'll show you three of the solutions that came in after I had already done one for the book, and we put these into the show. On this day, God will roar from Mount Zion. His voice will thunder from Jerusalem. The heavens and the earth will tremble and quake, but God will be a shelter for His people, a mighty fortress for the Israelites. And he did, I show this. Here's another one that he did, and I show this these versions because it was an interesting thing in the show. There were strong preferences between different people seeing the show. For example, I said the Newsweek and a lot of people loved the solution of Knuth. and others would, go for Hermann Zapf and so on. But a lot of my German friends were mostly fascinated by the Sturm und Drang in this, so they would say, this is wunderbar, and on these. And so just to it's well known that there are many different standards for beauty. Now, to my own taste, this is more for me. The artist here is in Puerto Rico. It's interesting. He's a prominent banker in Puerto Rico, and in his 50s he asked to be apprenticed to master calligraphers. He loved calligraphy, and he became a master calligrapher himself. And he died a few years after doing this, but it was done on very delicate red paper and very miniature. And anyway, it's an absolutely gorgeous piece of work. Claude Dietrich, a Frenchman living in Peru, when I requested him to do this, he has this about the Ark of the Covenant, Jeremiah 3:16, actually, this is one of my absolute favorites in the book. I have to move fast here. The man who if anyone is more famous as a calligrapher than Hermann Zapf, it would be Friedrich Neugebauer in Austria. And this is absolutely masterful. There's absolutely no whiteout on this, and he had in every way the form of this is incredibly good, and his style again unique to in his books. It was the greatest satisfaction to me to learn that after the book was published, he asked for a copy of unbound signatures, and he took them and mounted them. He mounted all of the art from all of the things and set it up as a show and exhibited it several places in Austria. So that was some. That's a master like that would not think that I ruined it with my computer editing. Was great news for me. Jean Evans of Cambridge. She lives off of Harvard Square. Did 2 Peter 3:16, and it's an interesting passage. Paul says this in all of his letters whenever he refers to these things. Some of his writing is hard to understand. Ignorant and insecure people distort his words just as they twist the rest of the scriptures, and they destroy themselves in the process. So here, since they're talking about Paul writing being hard to understand, she used a cryptographic technique, where you have to sort of puzzle out what the letters are as you go. Okay. Now, Tim Botts is one of the great calligraphers of Bible verses, and has many books about his favorite verses of calligraphy. And I asked him to do Luke 3:16. John told everybody, "I am baptizing you with water, but someone more powerful is coming. I'm not even fit to untie his shoes. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and with fire." Now, the interesting thing here is the translation where it says a Holy Spirit, and not most translations say the Holy Spirit. And I went with a minority view there, because Luke in his Greek did not say the Holy Spirit, but said a Holy Spirit. And so there's a little story here that this was the verse that was chosen by Lutheran magazine for the cover of one of its issues a few years ago, and somebody wrote a letter to the editor after saying, the devil has gotten into Lutheran magazine because he's denying the Holy Spirit. He's denying the Trinity because this translation doesn't say the Holy Spirit like my Bible says. It says a Holy Spirit. Well, it's interesting that one day I was walking in the hall at Stanford, and my secretary calls out the door to me and says, "Don, what translation did you use in your book?" And I said, "Oh, it's my own translation." And so she tells the person on the phone, "Yeah, he did his own translation." And well, it turned out it was the editor of this magazine. But it was great. The editor had a response in there saying, if you look in the original Greek, this is the way it is, and you'll find reputable Bible scholars doing this translation. But but anyway, there it is. Now Ismar David did Leviticus 3:16, and he is another person in his 80s, spent his life on doing beautiful biblical text. Several of his books on Hebrew calligraphy are available. He's probably in America the most well-known calligrapher in Hebrew. This is "The priest shall burn the pieces on the altar." He has it in Hebrew and in English, using a kind of an old style of Hebrew. Now, I'm getting near the end, but I have to tell you this wonderful story from the man in Bombay. A calligrapher named Satyanarayanan Malaya Wadashurla in Bombay is an absolutely brilliant person, works for the Bombay Times, and lives in some kind of a commune there. And I asked him to do 2 Samuel 3:16. He had never seen anything about the Bible before, but he was enthusiastic about this project because he was a great admirer of Herman Zapp. And he sent me back 10 solutions to and I had to choose only one, and I could have very happily chosen at least 3 of them. This is one that he did. It's about a very touching story that's not well known at all in the Bible. I hadn't known about it before I worked on the book. Michal's husband walked behind her sobbing as far as Bahurim. Then Abner ordered him to go back, so he went back. And there's a little story about Paltiel and Michal, and in this part is having to do with King David stealing the wife away from this man. And this particular example was actually done with grains of sand. This is real sand that he put paste on there and got the letters to be in sand for this one. The next one, Michal's husband walked behind her sobbing. You see beautiful brush lettering. Here's one where he used actual tears. He took watercolor and then he took his own tears and to make this sobbing effect. Another one with the colors of letters. Michal's husband walked behind her sobbing as far as Bahurim. Here you see the teardrop coming out of the eye, so he went back. Which one would you choose? So the one that I chose is this one. Again, another great. But this is the reason I chose this is because these letters are distinctively Indian. From India, there's a feeling that you couldn't find anywhere else in the world coming out here besides the other beauty of it. So I had 10 of them. I'm showing you 5 of his solutions to this verse. And the last one is my absolute favorite. Julian Waters, who's the art director for National Geographic, did 1 Samuel 3:16, and Eli called him saying, "Samuel, my son," and he answered, "Here I am." You have to know the story to realize how great this is, because Samuel is sort of very timidly saying, "Here I am," because of the story, which I can't go into now. But it's captured just perfectly with the weights here. And as I'm sitting there on the computer digitizing these letters, they even look good, at 100 times size. It was just a treat to work with that. So that's the last slide. So the title of my book is Bible Text Illuminated. This word illumination has a double meaning. You know, the word manuscripts are said to be illuminated by the monks, and also we wanted to shine the light on them and understand what people have said about these verses. To me, however, this illumination was really extra sensory perception comes through here. Walt Whitman, when he was speaking to artists in 1851, said, "To the artist has been given the command to go forth into all the world and preach the gospel of beauty." In these slides, I showed you calligraphers working with the Bible. I think most of you know that in other religions, calligraphy is even more associated in China and Japan. There's intimately connected. The calligraphy is intimately connected with religious experience. And right now at Harvard, at the Sackler Gallery, there's a great exhibit of Islamic calligraphy. And I have the catalog here. And it said in here, it mentions an Islamic maxim. It says, "Calligraphy gives greater clarity to truth." And the title of the catalog that they chose from another Arabic metaphor says, "Calligraphy is music for the eyes." Okay, so excuse me. This is at the Sackler, yeah. And it was mounted originally at the Metropolitan in New York, and then went to Los Angeles and so on. So I just want to summarize by saying that many people's most deeply felt religious experiences are connected with music and/or fine art, and I think that in the future, no doubt, mystical experiences will be associated also with computer-generated videos, and not only religious mystical things, but also great expositions of science. Technology will also be done with the assistance of art. Somehow I'm thinking that these experiences transcend science, and I hope that these examples illustrate why I think that. Okay, I took a little longer today, but I still do have time for questions.
As usual, Don, you overwhelm us.
You have a question, Doug?
That's the comment.
Okay.
It speaks for itself.
Thank you. Yes?
The way I see the purpose of art is to communicate emotion. The artist is trying to make someone experience something they never felt before. I can also see craft as also being beautiful. You have art and craft, both have beauty in them, but I can only see a computer program as a craft. I can't see how a program could communicate emotion.
Okay, so you're saying that art and craft, you can see how they communicate beauty and emotion, but it's hard for you to see how a computer program can communicate an emotion. That's right. I can't write a computer program. Well, I might be able to animate something. I don't know, but that wouldn't. No, what I'm thinking about the beauty in programming when I talked about that is more of the way you would think of it in literature, where you see something that fits, that really clicks because it's so elegantly stated, or something like that, and it's sort of music to your. I can remember when I was a college student, I was learning about compilers by reading code, and there was assembly programs, and there was a program that I got from IBM called SOAP, written by Stan Poley, and it was absolutely beautiful to me to read it. It was just like hearing a symphony when I would read this code, because every instruction was sort of doing two things, and it was all coming together. I also read the code of a compiler that was written by Alan Perlis, actually, and it was just like plodding, and it was just like it was excruciating to read it, because it didn't have any wit to it whatsoever. it was, it got the job done, but it was disappointing, and I was encouraged to rewrite that program in a way that would have the style of Stan Poley, and so that's how I got into software. But in fact, it's very subjective, obviously, but I do think that there are issues of style that come through and make something a pleasure to read, but it not necessarily that it will give me a transcendental emotion.
Was that rhythmically plotting?
I don't know. I mean, it was just would put something in one register and then move it into another. I mean, it was just it just was very brute force. Well, it would do in 12 instructions what you should have done in 3. Yes.
What was it like using a computer program to design the typeface?
Yeah. Designing a typeface is an interesting case where I like to people like to talk about proving programs correct, and a lot of programs you can use formal methods to say their correctness, but when it comes to these programs that I wrote for letter forms, there was no way that I could prove that this was going to be a beautiful A. It was just I would just have to try it and hope that if, the next day I do it with other parameters, it wouldn't turn out to be ugly. I have no rational way to formally say what A-ness was. But you have to know how to spell the word A-ness. That Doug Hofstadter said that the key problem, the first problem in artificial intelligence is what is the letter A, and my response was the second big question in AI is what is the letter I. AI, you don't get it. Well, so as I'm doing these letters, I started out thinking it would be easy, and it turned out that it was 5 years before I got anything that satisfied me. And the first book that came out was a great disappointment to me after I saw it in print. I burned with disappointment. I actually felt so hot flash when I saw it, and I think, oh no, it just doesn't. I opened the book expecting to be really happy with it, and I spent after I put so much time into it, back to the drawing boards. Still work until I could tune it up again. So there's lots of things going with this. When you design something yourself, you're overly sensitive to it. You can't view it dispassionately. If I see someone's used my fonts, I can't think, during a lecture, I can't concentrate on the lecture. I thinking, shouldn't I have changed the letter S a little bit? But I'm sure all artists go through this, and it's because the more subjective it is, the harder it is to know that you've got quality. Same with, in some ways, with the student thesis. If we had a theoretical thesis where somebody could prove something correct, they could finish it a year earlier, and we wouldn't have to convince the student that they've graduated. But if somebody does a good piece of design, they always think, well, how do I know it's right? And it takes another year before we can build up their confidence and say you've done it. Yes.
I came a little bit late, so maybe you discussed this earlier, but for each of the pieces of artwork you put up, you use the word solution.
It's a solution in a sense that I present them with the problem, saying if you had seen the text, just unformatted text of these words, it just looks like blah 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 blah, and they looked at that and they made it into something spectacular that sort of is moving. I don't know. I have this poster in my office, and I keep looking at it for almost 10 years now, since it was printed, and I'm not tired of it yet. So in that sense, it was a solution to their design to the challenge that we gave them. That would.
It's not the word I think that I would have
No.
thought first.
Yeah.
Solution or
Yeah. Well.
a solution artwork as a solution to a problem.
That's true, but it was a commission that they were given. With Tim Bott's his other books, like Doorposts is one of his books. He starts out and he says, let me choose my own verse, and I'm going to take my favorite ones, and I'm going to show exactly what it feels like to me. But in this case, I gave him one, and it's like taking a required course at in college. It's different. It's a little different from that perspective. So I think when it came out, it actually looked like it could have looked like it was their favorite verse, but in reality, most of these were not famous verses. They were ordinary verses. We were shining a light on them, trying to illuminate them, but they made them great. So, yeah. Behind you there? No. Here.
You keep saying that sort of just subjective. Do you feel like the beauty is really just a subjective notion, or have you based on objective reality?
I don't know how to write a computer program that will say something is beautiful or not, but I know when something affects me and when it doesn't. I mean, so there's this saying, it's clever, but is it art? But sometimes I know that that to me something is art. But don't ask me to give you an algorithm for it.
Unfortunately, we are already way over.
Oh. Yes, I have something to say though before we quit, and that is some homework for next time. I put on the web a wonderful short story by Raymond Smullyan, and so if you get to my home page and then go to Smullyan, SMULLYAN.html, and you can look at this story called Planet Without Laughter. It's a marvelous parable on many levels about limits of rationality. You can read it as to get insights about religion, all religions, the question of form over substance in religion. You could even read it as a metaphor about the drug culture or many other ways. But in any case, I think you'll find it thought-provoking, and if you read this, you'll be able to understand a few of the points that I make in the other lectures. I didn't put any links to it anywhere else because I'm still waiting for official permission from the publisher. But I think that I've been fair in asking for the right permissions, and it is now on the web there. So that's my announcement. And I remind you as you leave, I encourage you to take a look at the original artwork here, and also you can look at this catalog of the Islamic art. Thank you very much.